Kaiju Network podcast. This is our G Fest 25 retrospective. I'm your co-host Kent, and with me is your other co-host
Jason. Just kind of, just got a thing going on in the background there. But anyways, I kind of caught a little cold here, just kind of an allergy thing. So just kind of bear with me while I cough and hack, blow my nose from time to time. So.
Yeah. Well, I want to get started right off the bat by having a shout out to James Gonis and Matt Weinold and the Monster Party podcast. We met James 2 G-Fests ago, and he came back this year along with Matt Weinhold, and so we were able to meet Matt for the first time. And really great guys. They even interviewed us briefly Saturday night along with a bunch of other Kaiju fans. So definitely great guys. If you haven't checked out their podcast already, please do so. They talk not only Kaiju on there, but they talk about Universal monsters. They talk about other foreign horror and monster films too. They recently, I think within like the last month, had a guest on there that was talking about toys and the toy making process. They also had within like the last month or two a person on there talking about monster magazines, horror magazines, and stuff like that. They're one of the few podcasts that I tend to listen to on a regular basis, and I'm not joking when I say that. They are one of the few podcasts. They're about maybe 4 or 5 podcasts at best that are in my regular rotation that I tend to listen to on a regular basis, and they are one of them. They have a great rapport. There's great chemistry there between themselves and what they have with their guests. And they just talk about a lot of things that I personally find interesting that go beyond the kaiju realm, like I talked about earlier, like Universal horror films and horror magazines and stuff like that. So if you're also into all that stuff, definitely check them out. I mean, they're definitely a bunch of great guys, great chemistry. They're worth your time. Definitely add them to your iTunes subscription library. And so a couple weeks from now, let's see, what will be the date here? The date will end up being the 4th of August. So I just am now realizing this. So Jason, I will be out of town on the 4th of August, so we will not be able to do a podcast on that particular date. So instead of the 4th, it'll probably end up being maybe, I don't know if the 9th will work out for me or not. Or excuse me, I'm coming home the 9th. I don't know if the 11th. Let's say tentatively, I will be home I will be ready the 11th of August for our next podcast. And so if that's the case, if it's not the 11th, it'll be the following week, which will be the 18th. We will definitely cover Ogon Bat, or as the saying, as the American title is, the Golden Bat. So that's something that we will end up covering on that particular date. Yep. So and then tentatively just pencil in August 11th, but we will let everyone know. I'm coming back the 9th. I just am not sure if I'm going to be ready by the 11th. I could be, and I should be if I remember. But it's just a matter of really trying to work things out. But we'll let everyone know how things go. At the latest, we'll let everyone know Friday the 10th if we're going to have a podcast that week. If you don't see anything on our social media about, doing a podcast on the 11th, then we're not doing one. So we'll be doing it the following week on the 18th.
Yep. And then just FYI, just earlier this week, I think a few or so days ago, the second part to the Godzilla anime came out on Netflix. So I don't know if you should somehow fit that into our schedule to review, or kind of like what we've done earlier in the year. What do you kind of have in mind on that?
For Godzilla anime. You
Yeah.
know what? Quite honestly, let's actually cover Godzilla anime. I totally forgot, and I can't believe I forgot because I started watching it here the other day. Um, yeah, let's actually on the 11th or the 18th cover the second Godzilla anime, City on the Edge of Battle. Let's do that
Mm,
instead. We'll move Ogon back an episode. So let's do that.
sounds
Um,
good.
Also, Rampage came out earlier this week. So if you haven't picked up your copy, at least the DVD Blu-ray copy of the film, do so. I watched it again here. I think what was it, Wednesday, and I loved it when I watched it in theaters, and I loved it even more the second time around, which I didn't think was possible because I walked out of that film really loving it. So yeah, definitely check it out. I love the movie. I think it's very good. I
Mm,
think it should end up being something that should be on everyone's buy list right now if they haven't already bought it. Also, if you're watching this live on YouTube, there is a chat box off to the side. You can use that. You can ask questions. You can contribute to the conversation in any way, shape, or form. We are going to be talking about G Fest this particular episode. So if you were attending G Fest, try to keep it related to that. But so with that, let's just go ahead and dive right into GFest 25. Before I get into the heart of the conversation here, which, obviously talking about some of the panels that we went to and all that, I'm working on uploading videos of some of the panels I attended and some of the photos as well that I took over the weekend. It's going to take a while. I have one video already uploaded on our
yeah, I just
channel.
noticed that one.
Yeah, so if you are watching this right now, go ahead and you can pause this or whatever. You can go into our channel, and in our playlist, there should be a GFest 25 link there. One video at the moment should be up. I know I at least have put up one video at the moment, but the reason why it's going to take so long is because all but maybe two, if not three, of the videos I took during the convention basically consists of the entire panel. One, if not two of them, I cut short when it came time for the Q&A because sometimes during that portion of the panels, some questions may not necessarily pertain as much to the actual topic at hand or loosely, but I tried to record as much as I could. A couple of times I had my battery run out and I didn't have a spare one on me, and it took a while for my batteries to charge up. So sadly, a couple of them I wasn't able to get all the way through just because of battery issues, but
And
otherwise I was able to get most of them. And sometimes I cut out once the Q&A session started. So that's going to take me a couple of weeks to upload those videos and all that. And when I personally am done uploading those videos, because I have quite a few, 8 or 9 of them, I think it is, I will post a link of our GFest 25 playlist on our Facebook page, and that will go to even a couple of our other social media pages. So then you can click directly on that and you have access to at least all the ones I've uploaded at that time. And whenever Jason gets around to it as well, his videos will also be in that same playlist.
Speaking of the batteries, when I came home and just the other day here, if I can turn this off, I found where the batteries for my camera were at. They were in my smaller camera bag in the bedroom nightstand there. I had a feeling that they were in there.
Yeah.
But speaking of which, as far as my pictures and photos from this past event here, I have yet to extract those from the memory cards from both my Nikon camera and then the camera that Kent just gave me here a couple of weeks ago. I think I've just only recorded just a one panel on that one, and then I think I didn't really use that again. And I know that I recorded at least quite a few things on the phone, and as well as taking photos from my phone too. And then of course you probably have seen some excerpt videos from our Instagram TV there with the portrait thing, which is kind of what they're doing. You know, Cardinal Rule, shouldn't be doing that for video, but that's just kind of how they're doing it, which is kind of weird in a way. So yeah, you've at least have seen some of the videos that we've done there, but we'll also get around to uploading videos and photos both on YouTube and Flickr or wherever. Hopefully by sometime next week.
Okay, and so now let's actually dive right into the G-Fest discussion here. The special guests this year were Ken Pachiro Satsuma. He played Hedorah and Gigan from the 70s films. I'm trying to remember, too, if he did any other kaiju kind of in that late Showa era. Nothing comes to mind at the moment, but he may have. Just nothing's coming to mind. And Megumi Odaka, those of us who are longtime Godzilla fans know her as Miki Sagusa. She was there this year, the first time in about 18 years she's attended G-Fest. Keizo Morase, he ended up creating such kaiju as Varan, Mothra, both the 64 version, I believe even he was involved with the 92 version as well. I think he even worked on the classic King Ghidorah, the Showa King Ghidorah as well. He worked on a number of kaiju in terms of actually building the costumes and the suits during the Showa era, and I think even part of the Heisei era as well. Gene Rosardi was also a special guest. He is involved with some of the models and some of the practical effects for such films as the 98 Godzilla film, Titanic, etc. So he was there as well, and talking about his work, not just on the TriStar Godzilla film, but also really throughout his career. And Robert Scott Field, who's been going now for, 19 years now,
Yeah.
To the convention. And this year marked a special year. Sometimes when a certain G-Fest occurs on a particular date that marks a big anniversary, like here, what was it, in 65, I believe it was. So then it would have been 3 years ago during 2015. It was a big anniversary deal for Gamera. So they would have like a Gamera room. They were showing Gamera films throughout one of the days there during the convention as well. And the following year was the 50th anniversary of the original Ultraman. So they had made a big deal about Ultraman, showing various Ultraman, classic Ultraman TV episodes and all that to celebrate that anniversary. This year marks the 50th anniversary of Destroy All Monsters. And they had a room in the lower level of the hotel where they had a Destroy All Monsters display. They had a couple of posters in there, including a promo poster from ADV Films when they released that film for the first time on video and DVD here in the US back in 98 during the Big TriStar Godzilla. I just forgot the word, when it was out in theaters. And all those other movies were being released and re-released. So they had a promo poster there. There were other photos, books. There was a display of X Plus figures of the kaiju that were involved in Destroy All Monsters. That kind of set up a scene from the end of the film, so to speak. And it was a wonderful display in there. And so I kind of thought one of the things that we would do is really talk about some of the panels, if not all the panels that we went to. We don't have to dive too deep into them, but give our impressions of some of the panels, go through it, and then at the end, towards the end of this episode, give our overall impressions and then rank all the G-Fest that we've been to so far. So what do you think of doing it that way?
Yeah, I think, excuse me, I think you could probably, I think that'd probably be a good format of doing it.
Okay. So the first panel I went to at the convention was a panel on the 20th anniversary of the TriStar Godzilla. And those of you who may have seen the previous show know that I was just begging for this particular panel to try to be as balanced as possible. I think there were 5 panelists involved on this particular panel, and I was just begging. I'm like, have at least, please, 2 people try to defend this film. And it was actually a pretty good panel. It wasn't as harsh as what I was expecting it to be. And thankfully, a couple people really came to the defense of the film. They weren't, fans of the film per se, but they were people who, yeah, more or less maybe didn't care for the film, but over time had said, this film isn't anywhere near as bad as the reputation it has gotten over the 20 years, that people kind of need to relax a little bit on this film. I still kind of rolled my eyes, though, a little bit when people were saying, well, this kind of is if you called it The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms or whatever, and I'm just rolling my eyes. I'm going, here we go. It's that kind of same old tired argument again about The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. But nevertheless, it actually turned out to be a panel that was pretty, I thought, was pretty good to the film, considering that how most of the fandom feels about it. And I was really happy to see that it really was kind of defended, even though maybe in either a backhanded way or in a very soft way, it was defended more or less by a lot of people. And so there wasn't all this venom being shot at it like I kind of was half expecting there to be. So it was a good panel. I enjoyed that one.
As far as me, the very first day, it was actually kind of a mixture. Whereas I kind of explored the Zilla's 20th birthday panel there for a bit. I think I went with you there, and then I decided to just kind of walk over and see the Keizo Murase interview that was over at the Dojo Studios. I think I was just there for a little bit. It was from what I've known, it was pretty interesting. Just kind of a little bit of how he got into the business there, and the like. And then kind of same with you when I was at the Godzilla 98 20th birthday panel there. Yeah, it was. There was good parts, and then there was kind of some down parts to it there. But for me, I think from what I have seen there, it was a pretty decent panel there. So yeah, both from what I've seen there were pretty interesting. Get one side of the 20th birthday of the 98 movie, and then kind of get an inside look of a person who has been doing a lot of the practical and monster suit making for a very long time.
Mm-hmm. By the way, I totally forgot to ask you, have you done an audio version of our preview, GFest preview episode?
No, I haven't gotten around to that yet. Just with this cold and everything, it's just been kind of out of it for a bit. But I would like to try to do that this weekend if I can.
Okay. Just wondering. I forgot to ask you that before we started here. Okay, so the next panel I attended after the TriStar Godzilla panel was the Golden Bat panel. The Golden Bat, well, I think it was, I think I don't think actually it was an anniversary. No, it wasn't,
No.
because the 50th anniversary for that movie would have been in either 2015 or 16. I think it would have been 2016. And I did enjoy this panel. I knew a little bit about Golden Bat just from personal research over the last couple of years. I knew that he was arguably Japan's oldest superhero, maybe even the world's oldest superhero. I guess that maybe in some circles he's considered that. To me, it always seemed like the jury was still out on that. Nevertheless, I really enjoyed it.
Hmm.
The panelists went into a lot of depth as far as kind of how he got started, the superhero and the mangas, and who his original creator was, kind of his personality. Also dove into a movie that was made in the 50s that was a lost film now. That apparently, I guess, there are only a couple stills of it. I guess no one maybe knows where this movie is at. But the photo showed a film that looked looked like, I don't know. I mean, I can't really judge an entire movie from a couple of stills, especially one that I've never seen. But uh, it looked like it would have been a little goofy. But I was kind of sad to hear it was considered a lost film, because before he had mentioned it was a lost film, I'm thinking to myself, wow, I really need to see this, because I am a Golden Bat fan. At least I am of that Sony Chiba film. And then it went into this Golden Bat cartoon that came out late 60s, early 70s. Um, Sadly, that's incredibly expensive. When I found out you could be spending $300 to $500 on that cartoon, I'm like, well, nope. I'm not spending that much on a cartoon that's that old. But then he gave a preview of a 2000s anime that they were going to start off. And I don't think it ever got off the ground, if I remember correctly. I think the anime, they had a promo, they showed it, and I don't think it did all that well or something like that. Nevertheless, um, unfortunately, it did not happen. But man, it looked really cool. And as a fan of Golden Bat, I really would have loved to have seen that anime. It would have been great to have that come over to the States or something, or maybe have it available to purchase on home video with at least English subtitles attached to it. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. But I, I like that panel. It was informative. I did learn some things from it. And it's too bad, though, that not as many people attended it. And I think a lot of it's just oddly, I think a lot of it's just because people never really heard of Golden Bat, which is a little strange, because especially if you're someone who's been attending G Fest for a while, I would assume at some point that with the in-house channel, you would have seen that film, or at least parts of it. Um, and maybe some people did, and it just wasn't for them. But Golden Bat is it's a crazy movie, and we'll get into it more here a couple shows down the road when we actually cover it. But it was a great panel. I really enjoyed it. I learned quite a bit there. But I was a little sad that not as many people attended. I really thought maybe Golden Bat would have a larger following than it actually did, but it was still a good panel.
Yeah, this was the same panel that I also went to, and it really went in deeper than I uh, thought it was going to go, and I didn't realize how far back this whole thing began. It's like the guy who did the panel, he went in really deep, even way before was it before the time of Golden Bat was created. It was, I think, it kind of all started out with the creator. He was kind of doing these, or he kind of gotten into the business of one of those shadow kind of puppet shows
Uh,
decades ago.
called Kamishibai, I think is what it's
Uh,
called. Your
yeah,
paper.
it starts with a K,
I
and
know what it is. It's Kama Ishibai or Kamishibai.
yeah, somewhere around that. in that area. And he also kind of, when he kind of got into talking about Golden Bat, he also kind of compared to certain similarities between Golden Bat and as well as Superman. And it was kind of eerily, if you might put that, coincidental in how those two kind of matched up with one another as far as the character development and the story part between both Golden Bat and Superman, which was pretty interesting. But yeah, I really like that panel, and kind of what you mentioned, that you were hoping to see some people there, attend to that more. But with it being kind of maybe one of those oddity kinds of films or whatever it is, I think people haven't really gone that far into it, or maybe for some of those they were probably waiting in line, or for both the autographs and as well as the dealer's room. But that could be one of the cases, is that they might have not delved that far into recognizing Golden Bat. So who knows?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you bring up a couple of points there. Maybe people were waiting in the dealer's room or waiting for autographs. That definitely could have been a part of it as well. I just think I think it just had more to do with not a whole lot of people know a whole lot about Golden Bat. Because if you try to do some research yourself, if you really kept at it like the panelists did, yeah, you could probably find a lot of the same things, maybe even more, if you kind of knew how to look for it. But otherwise, yeah, there's just not a lot out there, at least in the English language, that talks about the Golden Bat.
Yeah, it's like even the guy that ran the panel, he had to get some collaboration from other people that know that specific property.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so the next panel I went to was the HMan 60th anniversary panel. The panel was pretty neat, but it was mostly a Q&A panel. That doesn't mean it was bad, but a lot of the information about that film was some stuff that I think might be available on the Columbia DVD that came out here. Gosh, man, that was 2009, so basically 9 years ago. I think there were some special features on that disc. It's been a while since I've looked at that particular disc, but it was a pretty interesting panel. One of the things that I learned was that how they made the HMan ooze up like walls and around people and all that was that they would build these model rooms and rotate them and film them in a particular way as well. So that was pretty neat. Otherwise, and there were some great behind the scenes stills too that were provided. Again, I'm not sure if some of that stuff was included on the DVD or not. I assume there were a few things on that DVD, but some of that stuff I had known before because I've read a couple of books talking about the film. One of them is a Peter Brothers book on Ishiro Honda that kind of dove into a lot of his science fiction films. And so some of the stuff that the panelists brought up were things that I had read, at least from that book. But it was a good one, but it was mostly Q&A. But yeah, the HMan is a film that I like. And I was happy to see, though, that they were in agreement that ship part, which is in the American film anyways, and I have yet to see the Japanese version of it, which is also in that Columbia DVD set. In the American version, it is a throwback, or not a throwback, but a flashback. And it's very eerie, very haunting, one of the creepiest things I have ever seen on film. And a lot of the people in the room, including the panelists, agree with that. So I'm very happy to see that the film, or at least that particular moment, is very much appreciated by a lot of people who have seen the film. And I guess in the Japanese version, according to the panelists, if I remember correctly, they said that is actually, I think one of the first things that you see in the film, and obviously in the American film, it's a flashback, but I guess in the Japanese version, it's something that actually occurred. So, like I said, I haven't seen the Japanese version, which is odd considering I have owned that set for 9 years. But yeah, it was a decent panel, but I'm not big of a Q&A person. I'm one of those people that's old school. I like sitting in a panel and having someone teach me, basically give a lecture. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with a Q&A session, but I tend to I personally tend to pay closer attention. I tend to learn better when someone's there lecturing. Like if you look at when I was in college, if you took a look at some of my grades from college, the classes I tended to do better in were classes that the professor actually lectured instead of trying to get the entire student body involved. So that's just a preference of mine, but it was pretty good. Not a bad panel.
Yeah, that was the other panel that I attended. I think I was just there for a little bit before I just kind of took a little break for the next couple of hours before the next panel that I went to, which was the 50th anniversary of Destroyer Monsters. But from what I have heard, or from what I've seen from that panel, it was pretty informative, and they delve in pretty well into that, and as well as kind of talking about some of the other potential films that that Toho was planning on doing with the HMan property, like potentially face the Frankenstein monster, and I think there was another kind of potential film that they were going to do, but I totally forget at this point in time. But yeah, from what I've heard before, I kind of jolted out of there and take a break to go to the dealer's room. It was pretty informative, and just some of the things that you knew about the movie, and some other little bits and pieces that you may not have spotted or you didn't know about it. It was a pretty interesting, or informative panel that they had on the HMan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't bad. It just was one of those that happened to be something that I knew. I'm not an expert. I'm not saying I'm an expert on it, but I knew enough about it that I walked away from it. Yeah, I did learn a few things about it, but by and large, it was a panel that I didn't learn a ton. That's not to say it wasn't good or it wasn't fun. It was, but yeah, I kind of walked away knowing something, which is better than nothing. But yeah, speaking of a panel in which I walked away not really learning a whole lot, and I'm not saying this as an insult. I'm just saying that this is a panel. This next one I'm talking about is one that I've done a lot of reading about, and one that's obviously been talked about a lot in the fandom as well. And that is the celebration of Destroy All Monsters, which was done by Ed Gajuszewski and Steve Reifel. Again, it was a very good panel. If you were someone who knew very little or nothing about the film, this would have been probably one of the best panels you had attended all weekend long. For me, I still had fun, but like I said, I walked away really not learning a whole lot, just because, again, I've been a fan for so long, and I've read a lot of books and other material, and I've discussed this film with a lot of other fans over the years, that there isn't, at least to my knowledge, a whole lot of new stuff that a person can learn about the film, because obviously this is considered one of the hallmark films of the Godzilla franchise, and even for some people a hallmark kaiju film, because of all the monsters in it and a lot of the nostalgia a lot of the older fans have for the film as well. So this film is definitely a high mark for many fans within the Godzilla franchise, at least. So it still was a very good panel. I mean, Gajuszewski and Steve Reifel, I'm not sure exactly kind of what their majors were like when they went to college and stuff like that. Gajushevsky works in Japan periodically, I guess. I'm not exactly sure what he does. I've never heard exactly what he does, but he's kind of obviously with this franchise, he's kind of an historian and stuff like that. And a lot of us are, like August Rigoni's kind of that way too. Peter H. Brothers, etc. Steve Reifel is definitely that way too. Being a history major myself, obviously, I love learning about the past and things like that. Um, and especially when you talk about certain subjects, I am all focused. I'm there. But yeah, I mean, this is a film that has been talked about an awful lot. I mean, anyone who has purchased even a couple North American titles, whether you bought Steve Reifel's book or David Callett's book. Heck, Peter H. Brothers talks about it a little bit in his Shiro Honda biography. I haven't read yet Ed Gajushevsky and Steve Reifel's latest book on Honda yet, so I'm not sure if they talk about it in there. I know they've been saying that they try to focus a little bit more on Honda's non-science fiction work a little bit more in there. I'm sure they discuss it. In what depth, I'm not sure, because like I said, I haven't read it. But yeah, they might touch upon it in there as well. But yeah, I mean, there's just a wealth of information on Destroy All Monsters out there because a lot of people love it, and it's a film that people love to talk about. So for me personally, I walked away really not learning anything new, but it was still a very good panel. Like I said, if you walked in there knowing little to nothing about the film, that probably would have been one of the highlights for you over the weekend.
Yeah, I think I was probably there just maybe a little bit longer than you, or I might have left probably around the same time or something like that. Yeah, it was kind of like what you said. It was pretty much a lot of the stuff that you've already know about the film itself. And it's probably one of those films that has been critiqued or gone through countless times to where there isn't really nothing new to go through that anymore. It's just, I would just say it's just kind of more of celebrating the film itself, of reaching 50 here this year, and yeah, it was just kind of one of those panels that you already know a lot about already. I think it was just probably something. I think it was a good panel just to kind of relax from other things, but as well as just to kind of hear from both Ed and Steve, being together. I think they've been in a lot of the panels together this entire convention. I don't even think I've really seen them separate from one another. I think they pretty much have done every panel that they've done there together.
They've done a lot of work together. I think too, if I remember correctly, when Classic Media brought out those Godzilla DVDs here like 10, 12 years ago, they did a couple commentaries, and I think they both were together for a couple of those films. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. They're good friends and all that. So that concluded day one of the panels there. Then the next day, Saturday, the first panel I went to was the 50th anniversary panel of Gamera versus Virus. And it was incredibly fun. It not only covered the movie, but also some of the old Dark Horse comics involving Gamera and Virus as well, which I had totally forgotten about that. Dark Horse Comics did a Gamera run years ago. I think it was roughly around the same time Dark Horse Comics was doing Godzilla comics as well. But it's kind of great to see some of these. I personally would maybe consider Gamera versus Virus obscure, at least in the overall kaiju filmography. That's not to say it's as obscure as, let's say, Death Kappa. I'm not saying it's that obscure, but it's obscure enough. It's usually not one of the top, probably 30 films or maybe even 40 or 50 films most people talk about, or that I should say seasoned kaiju fans talk about when they talk about this particular genre. And it was just great to kind of celebrate this film because I personally went through a transformation with a lot of the Showa Gamera films 6 years ago when I had a resurgence in my own personal fandom. I went back and revisited a lot of the Showa Gamera films, and those were films that, by and large, I don't want to say I hated, but I thought they were really goofy. And part of me, too, at the time, being a teenager, a young teenager, looked at Gamera as kind of this, really this cheapo knockoff. Because it's true, Dai created him because Godzilla was so popular, and they're like, we're gonna cash in on this giant monster craze that's going on because Toho's making a lot of money off of these films. We can make them for not a ton of money, and let's kind of do something here where we can make a little bit of money off of that as well. And I did enjoy Gamera Guardian of the Universe. First saw that film like in what, 98, 99, and I actually was very impressed by it even then. But back then when I was seeing a lot of those Showa Gamera films for the first time, I didn't care for much of them. The only ones that I kind of halfway enjoyed, I did enjoy Barugan. I did enjoy Giron a little bit, and I also enjoyed Jiger as well. Now, since I've had a resurgence in my fandom within the last 6 years, I look at a lot of the Showa Gamera films, not all of them, of course, because there's at least one big stinker in that whole period. But I've looked at those films now, and they are some of the most watched films for me personally. I remember from the years of 2012 through really about 2015, I was watching a lot of Showa Gamera films every year. I mean, I remember one year I watched Virus 4 times in a given year. I watched Gamera versus Gauss like 3 times that year. I was really big into the Showa Gamera films again. And yeah, they're really hokey and all that, but there's a lot of charm to him. And like I said, I had a resurgence in my fandom. I think one of the things that helped me was that I got away from the genre for a while. When this podcast, then we were called Planet X Control Room. But when we kind of took a break for a year and a half, I basically got out of the kaiju genre for a bit because the 2014 film, which was supposed to come out in 2012, had been indefinitely postponed at that time. So I got away from it. And then when I got back into everything, really about New Year's Eve of 2011, and then definitely on and through 2012, I just had this renewed appreciation for a lot of kaiju films, not just Gamera films, but a lot of Godzilla films and all that too. Films that years before I would have come out and said I hated them or whatever. I know a lot of people out there who have listened to us for a while be like, well, you hate Shin Godzilla, Kent. And it's like, well, yeah, I do, but that's a totally different subject, but I have legitimate reasons for it. And I will briefly talk about that again here in just a second with another Steve Rifle Ed Gajuszewski panel that they had. But yeah, the Showa Gamera films, I think, are very fun films. And I would even argue they have moments of genius. And to see Gamera versus Virus get a little bit of the spotlight and some recognition, I thought it was fantastic. And for a film, and out of the Showa films, my favorite Gamera films that I tend to watch frequently now are Gamera versus Gauss, this one, Gamera versus Virus, sometimes Gamera versus Giron, but I do like watching Jiger fairly frequently as well. Those are the ones I tend to watch a little bit more than some of the others. Part of the thing, though, too, with me not watching the first Gamera and second Gamera as much is because Shout Factory only had English subs for those, sadly, not a dub. And I can only take so much of the subs before I start getting a headache and some eye strain. But it was great to see this film get some recognition. It was a fun discussion.
Mm. And the first panel that I went to was the Japan update with M11, aka Robert Scott Field, and it's kind of the usual panel that it is every year from what Ken and I have attended. He just kind of gives the updates of what's been going on in Japan, and with most recently the earthquakes that they've had there in Osaka, and I think maybe in another place. And then they've been kind of having some of the typhoons going through there, and then kind of afterwards he kind of talks a little bit about himself and how he went to Japan, and then he also kind of talked about that he kind of pretty much influenced was it the Bano to kind of come over and to kind of sell the rights to an American film studio, and thus with Godzilla 2014. So you maybe say we probably wouldn't have had got the 2014 Godzilla without Robert Scott Field there, and he also posted some photos on his Facebook page when he met with was it Elizabeth Olsen there just a couple of years before she was casted there. So it's kind of pretty interesting. What he was talking about there is pretty informative. And then of course you got the usual Q&A thing later on in the panel there after when he was kind of finished kind of giving his updates and the like. But as always, it's a pretty informative, in-depth update on Japan and the like.
Oh, there's some, I think, breaking news.
Did they just release the trailer?
I think the trailer just was released. Hold on, folks, while we watch this.
Yep. Definitely got to see this here.
Sorry about the... the pause here, folks.
Yeah, that's all right. From what I have seen on a post, that it was supposed to be close to a 3-minute trailer, which is, from what we're seeing here, is pretty accurate. And this is pretty epic, kind of the beginning part here.
Yeah. Ken Watanabe.
Yeah, it's like both him and Sally Hawkins are one of the only two that are still in this series. Oh wow, there's King Ghidorah.
Oh, I guess I didn't see that. There's Godzilla.
He was buried in the ice there. No way, that's Mothra.
Oh, there's Mothra. Oh, King Ghidorah.
Nice.
Rodan.
I like the music that they put in here. It's kind of angelic in a way. Oh, and there's Rodan.
I think I'm like a couple seconds ahead of you. Oh,
that's
it's silhouetted version. Oh, that is all that end shot. Oh, that end shot is so gorgeous. That just made my blood pump.
That is gonna be. I think that's gonna be one of the good movies of the year.
That you finished with the trailer?
Yep.
That ending part with the jets, it looked like they were basically assisting Godzilla.
Yeah.
Like, that almost brings a tear to my eye. I just
like how they incorporated the trailer music into that. It's really good.
Yeah, so we had a little bit of breaking news again. I'm very sorry, folks, that we kind of had more or less a dead spot there. But check this out. I don't know if Jason, you're going to post that right now. But definitely, regardless, go seek it out. Some of your friends already on Facebook may already have posted it or whatever other groups might have. But
You say you want me to post that right now?
yeah, on our page. Okay. But yeah, breaking news about next year's. Oh, that was brilliant. I mean, I was going to see it regardless, but that trailer, man, this film, a little interruption here. That film looks so ridiculously epic and apocalyptical, and it makes me wonder.
It looks so much better. I would have to say it's going to be by far so much better on so many levels than the first one.
The first one was epic and brilliant, in my opinion. This one, I'm wondering, man, are they going too far? Because now, the way that the things that we're seeing in this trailer, it makes me wonder, how is Kong versus Godzilla going to top it? I mean, you can't just have the two mightiest kaiju going at it. I mean, that alone, yes, will sell tickets, but you have basically an end of the world scenario in this film.
I have a feeling that, and from what I've heard from some of the other people that they've kind of had some kind of prediction with, is that there's going to be a much bigger monster coming into play in Godzilla versus Kong. And and I know this is kind of coming from some other people, but I would just take it with a grain of salt. But I wouldn't say it's not going to be true or accurate. But some have kind of speculated Destroyer or something, kind of being like the big baddie in that movie.
I kind of wonder, and again, none of this has been confirmed, but I really, ever since they announced Godzilla versus Kong, I thought to myself, they may end up pulling something like a BVS, for example, where you have these two icons going at it, but there's going to be a bigger bad where they have to team up. They'll probably duke it out for a while at first, but then something else will come along, draw their attention. They realize, look, this is a bigger threat. And then let's do it.
That's kind of the feeling that I've had for quite some time, because just now with seeing what we're going to be getting in Godzilla King of the Monsters just through this trailer, it's going to have to be bigger, and there's going to have to be a bigger threat kind of endangering Earth.
Well, and it makes me wonder, though, too, if Kong versus Godzilla in the eyes of fans will end up being a little bit of a disappointment if something like that were to occur. Because I've always thought to myself, yes, it would be great to have a winner. Like, you have one of them come out on top. But I'm always like, you know what? You can't do that. It's like Freddy versus Jason. Like, the ending was sort of ambiguous. Same thing with Batman versus Superman, although one could argue Batman would have won there. Others could argue with the Jason versus Freddy deal that maybe technically Jason won. But they try to have a lot of these look like a draw. And I've always kind of thought to myself, I don't think they're going to have an out-and-out winner on this, because then they're basically, and I forgot the word, but they're basically going to sort of, I just had it and then I lost it. Basically, they're going to sort of, for lack of a better term, anger maybe half, theoretically, of your movie going base if you were to have an out-and-out winner in some of these big battles. And so I've kind of thought to myself, they're either going to do it as a tie, or and it's going to be very ambiguous, or what they're going to do is have like another monster or two come in, and then they basically sort of team up and fight the other evil.
That's kind of what I'm predicting for that movie.
And to be quite honest with you, too, seeing Godzilla and Kong actually team up, like, just thinking about it gives me goosebumps. Like that
Mm.
actually would be awesome to see as well, where they team up against, call them the big kaiju fighting force or something like that, where they go up against, like King Ghidorah and Gigan or something like that. But that would be that to me would be fun too. But then again, though, too, a lot of people will be like, well, I want a Godzilla versus Kong. And again, I think it's going to be interesting how they handle that one. I think.
Mhm.
Um, not just because of what we're seeing here, although that's part of it, but I think it's going to be interesting how they handle it simply because these are two very popular kaiju. But anyways, back to G-Fest 25. So the next panel I attended on Saturday was the 15th anniversary panel of Godzilla, Mothra, Mechagodzilla, Tokyo SOS. And it was a really wonderful celebration of that film. Great panel, a lot of love for it, which is what I wanted to see out of this particular panel, simply because this is a film that I don't think gets sort of the love and attention it deserves, because a lot of fans are always talking about, I want to see monsters fight. I want to see monsters fight. And no joke, I've actually looked at the timer on this and timed it. Even though it's kind of intercut towards in the second half of the film with some human drama, basically the entire second half of the film is about the monsters fighting each other. Yeah, like I said, you have Airman Chujo coming in trying to find his uncle and his nephew, stuff like that. But a lot of it's the kaiju action, and it doesn't let up, and it's very epic. And I was very happy to see that there was a lot of love on this panel for that particular film. And it made me realize, damn, it has been 15 years
Hard to
since
believe.
Tokyo S. I just, that is, man,
I can still
time flies.
remember. I can still remember when the official Godzilla movie site had that entire Godzilla Tokyo SOS graphics and everything on there. It was, yeah,
And I
it's
remember the
hard.
day it came out on DVD in the States, and I went to a nearby Target to pick it up. And I remember the display they had for this film in it. And I quickly like was running over and picked it up. I just unbelievable just how quickly time flies.
Right.
Um, and oh boy.
Oh, I should probably kind of dive into some of the other panels I went to here. Pretty much kind of right around 11 in noonish time. This was kind of right around the time when both Kimpachio Satsuma and Megumi Odaka had their interview panels with Kyle Yale and Robert Scott Fields, with which I attended both of them simply because they were in the same room. Kimpachio was first, and then Megumi Odaka was just right after Kimpachio. And I think the first one, I think I captured almost the entire interview on my Nikon camera, but I unfortunately didn't get the last 2 minutes of that panel due to the battery in that camera going out. So right after that, I had to quickly go up to the room and get me the camcorder that Kit got me, and then I recorded the Megumi Odaka interview in that panels. Fortunately, I think I was in a different area in that room at the time, so I recorded that, and I think I might have barely gotten all of it before the battery went out of that one again. So thankfully, I got a majority of the interviews of those two interviews there, but it's just kind of your usual Q&A and just kind of their history with the Godzilla franchise and how they started and how they ended up to where that they were when those movies were made, and then also what they're kind of currently doing right now, and kind of your usual little Q&A between the panelists and the special guests there. But yeah, as always, they're informative and kind of get the behind the scenes with these actors, actresses, and yeah, it's as always just a really good panel.
Mm-hmm. All right. The next panel I'm about to discuss, sadly, was a panel, the type of panel that I fear that occurs every once in a while, and that is it was the Pacific Rim 2 panel. This thing, sadly, was a major hate fest on the film, and I don't have a problem with people disliking a film, and I would encourage them, obviously, to share their personal opinions and the like on it. But like we discussed during our preview podcast a couple of days before the actual convention itself, I've always said that if you get a panel where you have multiple people, um, talking about a movie or a video game or something like that, of course, the discussion is always going to come down to eventually, is this particular thing good or not? And I've always encouraged panelists to try and try to split things up as best as you can, to try to do it 50-50, where about half of it maybe dislikes it and the other half likes it. And there was nobody like that here on this panel. The funniest moment, though, of this panel was that one of the panelists, the one I would argue is probably the most vocal in terms of actually disliking this film, even said at one point that, oh, I mean, this is this isn't the worst thing I've ever seen ever in film, but, still pretty bad. And I just kind of thought to myself, I'm like, then why are you making the stink out of it that you are? It was a little funny that was said by that panelist, but I really I was disappointed by this panel, and I personally agree that yes, Pacific Rim Uprising was not as good as the first. I think I even said that when we discussed the film earlier in the year. It's not as good as the first one, but it definitely had more interesting twists and turns, I think, in terms of its story. The whole Charlie Day thing I thought was really interesting. I was not expecting that, and that was a nice surprise because that just was something I was not expecting. Could there have been more kaiju action? Yeah, but at the same time, at least personally for myself, I was interested in the characters and their stories. I was into them. I thought they were good characters. They weren't great, but they were good enough for me to get on that ride and to enjoy them. Like I've been saying for years, one of the reasons why I like Invasion of Astro Monsters so much is because the human characters are so fantastic. They draw me into their story. And that is one of the Godzilla films that either has one of the least amount of kaiju action in it, or it may even have the least amount of kaiju action in it. It's definitely up there towards the top in the franchise so far. But this was kind of like that film. Obviously, I don't think Uprising was as good as Invasion of Astro Monster, but I thought it was good enough. And I'm a little shocked that this film, I don't think it's polarizing, because I think across the board a lot of people think that this film definitely wasn't great. But and I understand why those who dislike the film simply because there wasn't as much kaiju action in it as the first one. I get that. I understand that. But from what I've seen, at least on social media, with some of the more prominent individuals in the kaiju fandom, like Kyle Yant and even August Ragone, they have come out and given their support of the film. They don't think it's the greatest thing in the world, but they think it has substance to it. And I agree. I think Pacific Rim Uprising definitely, yeah, it doesn't quite have some of the depth to it like the first one did, but I think it still has a lot of heart, and I still think it has a lot going for it. It has a lot of things that really keep that really work inside that world that Guillermo del Toro constructed in that first film, and it doesn't really veer too far off the reservation, so to speak, with its story. And it's it's still, I think, a good film. It's still entertaining, and I was very disappointed to see that on a panel with four people on it, that you couldn't get two people to at least try to defend it. You know, they could still come out and say, well, first of all, I don't care for this film, but I will be on the side that tries to defend it. I will try to talk about some of the film's brighter points. And they at one point tried to do that, but man, it only lasted maybe the better part of 15 seconds. Um, you know, and it just, it's disappointing. And yeah, it's not the best written film of all time or anything like that. And I understand, I think there was some issue maybe with the writing at one point as well, and some retconning and stuff. To me, that's not a big deal, because anytime you get maybe a new director on board, which this one had, and sometimes a new writing team, which I think this one had to some degree as well, things are going to maybe get overlooked or maybe changed to kind of suit a particular vision. But then again, though, too, Legendary was recently acquired by the Chinese, and the reason why certain things happen within Uprising is because the Chinese kind of mandated those changes. So that played a part in how, in the direction that the film took in several spots. But uh, this still was a this still was a fun panel, because I did learn some things. I think the gentleman's name is Ira Tarborn. He I went to a couple of his panels over the weekend, and he taught me an awful lot about kind of how Japanese cinema works on various levels, how certain ideas get through. I mean, it was very interesting. You kind of had to be there to really appreciate. In fact, I think this is maybe one of the panels that I fully recorded, and you would get basically some of that information. But I learned some things about why certain things were done the way that they were, such as like the ending battle taking place in Tokyo. A lot of people thought that the final battle taking place in Tokyo was actually kind of an homage to the giant robot and the kaiju genre, kind of the birthplace. But that's not the case. A lot of people are now either definitively saying, if not speculating, that no, the reason why it takes place in Tokyo is because the Chinese, who again own most, if not all, of Legendary Pictures, still have this suspicion and animosity towards Japan, that they're like, look, you will not destroy a Chinese city or anything like that. If you're going to destroy a place, destroy Japan, and you're going to destroy Tokyo. So I didn't really think about that, because after I sat there and I thought about it, I'm like, yeah, you know, I remember at one point reading some news that Legendary was acquired by, you know, Chinese or something like that. And I'm like, I never really thought about that angle, because yeah, I knew China and Japan had animosity. All that, of course, goes back
You can
to
kind of
World War
somewhat
II.
say it's kind of a little propaganda piece, somewhat.
I don't know if I would go that far. You can maybe say that it's a sprinkling of it, but it's not that big of a deal, I guess. But yeah, and I hate to say it, because a couple of the panelists are really good people and everything, and I appreciate honesty. But at the same time, I was disappointed in that it basically was a huge hate fest on the film, and I was very disappointed that they didn't even try to make an attempt where half the panelists try to defend the film. And this was my most disappointing panel of the weekend, was the Pacific Rim Uprising panel. I hate to say it, but I was deeply disappointed by it. I walked out of there. I was not happy with it, plain and simple.
Yeah, and then I was just next door uh, uh, for the Gene Rizardi panel, the guy who's done all the modeling stuff for not only the '98 Godzilla, but for Titanic and some of the other movies. However, I did not stay too long. I think I was probably there um, between 20 to 30 minutes or something like that, maybe a little bit shorter, because they talked mainly on the '98 Godzilla at the very beginning part, and they were kind of going talking about the behind the scenes and also showing some of the pictures of all the model works and like all the the harbor side with all those tall buildings and all those as those were practical, and then showing some images of a life-size Godzilla animatronic that they had in a shop there, which was pretty neat. And then kind of showing the kind of a bigger version and a smaller version of the remote control taxi, the one that was kind of used for that the end part where they were the human characters being chased by Godzilla. And now I think they also used that larger version of the taxi and did a different paint job for as a police car. And I think in one of the scenes, I think in one of the earlier parts of the film there. But yeah, and then after that, they were just kind of going outside of the '98 guys on, just kind of talking more about his personal or kind of his other works that he has been a part of, and that's kind of when I left that, and I uh, uh, kind of caught a little bit of that Pacific Rim 2 panel there with you. I didn't really stay too long, maybe for a few minutes or something like that. And I think I might have taken no. Let's see here. Trying to look on this thing here. No, that was before, so I might have left somewhere else. But I did go at the same time and to see a little bit of that Women of Godzilla fandom panel. I was in there
I
for just
wished I would have gone to that now. That I got in on the very tail end of that. That seemed like that was very interesting.
it was okay. From uh, as far as the panel went, it was okay. But I don't know. It's just kind of uh, a little bit interesting to say the least.
The next one I went and saw that day was the Veronet 60 panel. Unfortunately, that panel, I guess you could say, technically didn't occur because the panelists
Oh yeah,
didn't show up. I don't know
yeah,
what
I was there with
happened.
you.
I was concerned for a while that something happened to the panelists, but my theory is that the panelists may have been in line for autographs and sadly may have gotten held up. Um, but nevertheless, um, Andy, who helps with a lot of the technology, the mics and the like um, over the convention over a number of years now, he put in this documentary that at least the panelists wanted to show bits and parts of, and it was Keizo Morase having. It was this video that was probably recorded in the 90s, I think, where he was kind of showing the process of how they make a suit. And it was very interesting. The thing
And
is, though, if you own the Varan DVD, it's a special feature that's on that disc.
and that
So
exact same skin and the head that they were doing in that video is the exact same one that was displayed in the lower level.
mhm. Yeah, and the documentary is fine, but unfortunately, I was wanting to actually have this panelist go in and kind of talk more about kind of the history, what led up to Varan and all that. I know a little bit about Varan, and the fact that it was supposed to be this joint venture between Toho and I think it was ABC, but then ABC pulled out. Therefore, half, if not most, of the funding for the film was gone. Then Toho realized, oh shoot, like what do we do now? And so they basically worked with what they had and ultimately ended up deciding we're going to throw this film into theaters. And I don't think the film did all that well when it was in theaters at the time. And then, of course, it eventually came over in the States, I think about 3 years later, and then it was heavily re-edited with Myron Healy and the story redone. It basically sort of got, and I haven't seen the Americanized version of Varana. I bought it recently, so I'm not, I can't confirm, but I've heard from a number of people that who have seen it that if you thought King of the Monsters was a butchered up job of Godzilla, I've heard some people say that Varana is actually worse. So I'm very curious to see what that looks like. I bought the Americanized version of Varan here over the week, and like I said, I haven't seen it yet, but I'm hoping within the next week I might be able to sit down and watch it and get an idea. I've thought about maybe doing an extra video of that where it's like Kent watches American version of Varan for the first time, and you basically will watch the movie with me and get my reactions as I watch it for the first time. That's an idea I've been thinking about doing as far as some content here on YouTube. But yeah, I've never seen it, but it would be interesting. I was hoping to have a fun panel where we got to learn a little bit more about its production and all that. Sadly, that didn't occur, so we both kind of left early from that panel and all that. So it was disappointing that didn't happen, but the documentary that was shown was still pretty nice. But again, it's something you can watch at your own leisure if you own that Tokyo Shock DVD of the film.
Yeah, I think that was the last panel that I went to before 7 o'clock with the Jeopardy championship, and then the award ceremony and costume parade.
Yep. And so that concluded Saturday. Sunday, the first panel I went to was about sonoramas and here we go again, that word Kamishibai.
Yeah.
Stan High got me into that stuff. I think, what was it, 2G Fest ago? He had a panel about sonoramas, and basically, I'm sure if you were to Google Kaiju sonoramas, you'll find some results. But basically, it's these very artistic pictures that were displayed like on Kaiju models, toys, magazines, etc. You know, during the 60s, 70s, probably even 80s as well. Beautiful stuff. I mean, I love the artwork, and I believe even at Steve Rifle and Ed Gajuszewski's table in the dealer's room, I think they had a couple books that were devoted to sonoramas. And this was one thing where I just sat there and I thought to myself, man, you know, I collect a lot of stuff as it is already, and I don't really have space for much of anything else. And I thought to myself, man, if I started collecting sonoramas, I would be in big trouble because there's a lot of it out there, but it's all beautiful, and I just I like it. It's beautiful artwork. It's done very well, but then you get things like King Kong versus Ghidorah. You get things like Sanda and Gyra, you know, fighting each other while like maybe Godzilla and Ghidorah fighting in the background. You get Ultraman sometimes coming into some of these photos as well, fighting Godzilla Kaiju and vice versa. It's really fun stuff, and I really dig it, and I would love to collect this stuff. I don't know how difficult it is to collect, but it's neat stuff. And I took a couple pictures of it during that particular panel that I hope to again display on our Facebook page here in the next couple of weeks. But It was a lot of fun. I loved it, and that's one of the things I've been kind of itching at, maybe trying to get into the mindset of collecting at some point. But we'll kind of see here. But
Mm.
that was a fun panel. I dug it.
And for me, I went to the Don Fry interview in Ballroom One. Boy, that was quite the treat there, and he was, uh, kind of talking what he's done in the past, and then how he worked on the movie, and then I think the best part of that entire panel was the Q&As. It's like there were some little kids that was asking if he can say one of the catchphrases that he said in the movie. He's like, no, and then and then he kind of talks to them smoothly and just really does the catchphrase smoothly at the very end. There, it was pretty nice, and there was just a lot of laughs and everything. It to me, I would say that probably was one of the best panels that I've been to for G Fest 25. It was just a lot of fun in that one. You get a lot of laughs, and then kind of his backstory, not only in how from doing Godzilla Final Wars, but as well as what he has done in both the UFC and Pride.
Mm-hmm. The next panel I attended on Sunday was a panel devoted to Godzilla Planet of Monsters. However, two of the panelists didn't show up. So the two panelists that did show up, sadly, their discussion became stilted and a little disjointed because obviously the other two guys hadn't shown up. It was a decent discussion, but like I said, because two other panelists didn't show up, the whole thing really didn't get going all that well, and it sadly never recovered. But I appreciate the effort that the two panelists put in to try to really make it a lively discussion. It was informative. Again, I learned about kind of anime, the particular director of this anime, what some of his previous work was, kind of what to expect as this trilogy goes on. And it was an interesting discussion, but it was a little disjointed, unfortunately. I didn't stay for the whole thing. I stayed for maybe 35, 40 minutes of it before I left. And just a little side note, if you would indulge me for a moment, is I think people with Godzilla 2, the second anime having come out this week, and a lot of people obviously expressing their disapproval of it. I think people are being way too hard on this. I think you have to understand that this is a journey. It's an epic. But on top of that, too, I think not a whole lot of part of it, sadly, I think, is how Hollywood has created movies in recent years, where it's a lot of flashiness and a lot of action as well. I think that's part of it. And so many people are used to that if they get something where it's a slow burn, their attention veers somewhere else. And I think that's sad, because then you can't appreciate kind of the art form of storytelling, building a world, building characters, setting things up for an epic finale, which I truly do believe Part 3 will provide. I think fans are being too hard on this, because in my personal opinion, and I really think this really should be a unanimous decision or consent of the entire fan communities. Even if you don't like the anime, I think you really should agree with me in that this is probably the most creative we have seen the Godzilla franchise get in quite some time. And it definitely it has good characters. It builds a world that we've never seen before in the franchise, but yet at the same time has some minor familiarity with what we're used to seeing in previous films. And with the Godzilla character himself and everything, they changed certain aspects, but keep other aspects as well. They're trying to keep this character in this franchise fresh. And I think we need to do that because I know I have seen people get tired of kind of the same formula. Some of the complaints some had with some of the Millennium films was that there was a lot of familiarity, that Toho went back into the well and there was a lot of been there, done that. And a lot of people got tired of that. But then something drastically new comes along, like the Godzilla anime, and a lot of people are expressing tremendous disapproval. And I think a lot of Western fans are missing the point as far as what you're supposed to kind of expect from this anime. But even then, I don't think it's not necessarily that you aren't getting it. It's just that I think we're so accustomed to how some of these films go. We want something new, but we want familiarity. And if things in our mind tend to veer too far off, then we end up being disappointed or expressing disapproval of it. And I think that could end up hurting the franchise. That's why some of these franchises every now and then disappear for a decade or two at a time, if not longer, because either they don't innovate themselves or they do, but fans are kind of like the Godzilla fandom. You want some form of familiarity, but you don't want it too much. But then you get familiarity, maybe too much familiarity, and you're like, nope, I don't want that either. I mean, it's kind of hard if you're a producer or director to kind of figure out how you want to construct your story. And like I posted on my own Facebook profile today, I said, really, Shin Godzilla should have been what Godzilla anime was. I'm not saying it needed to be exactly what anime, but what I meant by that is that Shin Godzilla needed to be more innovative than it was. And I will get to this here in a moment when I talk about another panel I attended on Sunday. But Shin Godzilla needed to really try new things. And it really didn't. I mean, it did to a certain degree, but it didn't. And I've said before on previous podcasts over almost 2 years now since that film has been released that I don't think Shin Godzilla is a Godzilla film. I think I have some official backing from some legitimate people within the Kaiju community to kind of more or less back me up on that. But yeah, I think people are too hard on the Godzilla anime, and I really think what individuals need to do is shift their focus and to understand that this is an epic, like a Lord of the Rings, for example, and to understand that this is something different. Part of it is the Japanese culture, their way of storytelling is going to be different from that of ours. Another thing, though, too, is that, again, it's an epic. It's a three-parter. You're not going to necessarily get a big conclusion at the end of everything. So it's different, yes. And I personally enjoy that because this franchise needs a good shot in the arm. It's needed one for a good while. There have been some things that have been done that have maybe hit and miss. Godzilla 98 was a miss for a lot of fans. For me, it was a hit. GMK for a lot of fans was a hit. For me, on some level, it was a miss. Final Wars was a mess, but it had a lot of familiarity within itself as well. To me, the Godzilla anime really has brought a lot of great stuff to this franchise, and I personally think it works. It's not perfect, but I think it's something that this franchise needs, and I think it actually succeeds. I think it succeeds a heck of a lot better than Shin, but we'll talk about that in a moment.
But kind of what you're getting at, I think a lot of people, kind of like what you said, that one of the big problems was that they were bringing a lot of familiarity from the past, but then when something else kind of comes in, fresh with kind of a new plot and story or kind of mythology behind these monsters that they kind of disapprove. And to me, it seems like uh, they just to me it's kind of like let's see, where am I trying to get at? Is that they just don't even know what to kind of really go with. It's kind of maybe a little bit of hypocritical, if I'm trying to get this right. Kind of saying like, oh, like with the familiarities, been there, done that. It's kind of beaten down so many times. Some people say, "Oh, I want something new," but then when something new like the Godzilla anime comes, and then maybe like those people will disapprove. It's like, well, you said you wanted something that was fresh and new, so what exactly do you want? I mean, you can't. It's like you can't have it both ways in a sort of sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The next panel I attended was quite possibly one of the most interesting panels I have ever attended over the 7G Fests I have gone to. And it was a panel by Ed Gajuszewski, Steve Rifle, and I'm sorry to the other gentleman whose name I don't remember at this point in time. But it was hosted by those three guys, and it basically covered Japan and sort of its sense of nationalism over the course of the Godzilla film franchise and how that is portrayed within some of the films. A lot of people, and I kind of even wondered this too when I was sitting there, it seemed to be very negative on Japan. And I think as a history major, I know Japan's done a lot of, well, I don't want to say a lot, but they did some really nasty stuff during World War II. And they've never apologized for it. Whereas some countries like Germany apologized for the Holocaust and the rise of the Nazis and all that. And it was very interesting. I learned quite a bit about sort of modern Japan, so to speak, from really about the end of World War II all the way up to now, and the fact that that they're going through certain political changes now, similar to what we're seeing now in this country. And I'm not trying to get political here on this podcast, but I think to some extent it needs to be touched upon because that's kind of what this panel was about to some degree. But it really was kind of talking about how some of these films portrayed where Japan was at in their own, how they viewed themselves, how they viewed their relationship with other countries, etc. And then they got to a point where they finally came upon Shin Godzilla. And I'm surprised I never caught this. I mean, I knew about it by simply watching the film that this was a very pro-Japan. This is a film where, Japan's like, we want our sovereignty back. We don't want the U.S. to be a part of this anymore. That we can solve our problems ourselves. And I got that. And the thing was, though, it was a film that ended up becoming really a political statement, ultra conservative. And I had been saying for just about 2 years now, I've been telling people, I go, look, Shin Godzilla is not a Godzilla film. Shin Godzilla is a political film with Godzilla in it. Godzilla is nothing more than a tool in the film. And it's very obvious that that's what it is because the film focuses so much on the incompetency of the Japanese government and their response to not just disasters that come about, but also just trying to do lawmaking, legislative work, and that sort of thing. And it really confirmed what I've been saying, that this, and Steve Rifle and Ed Gajuszewski and the other panelists didn't come out and say that it's not a Godzilla film. But what they did more or less say, and I'm basically paraphrasing them here, is that it was basically about the government. That's what it was about. And you have other Godzilla films in the past where Toho was saying, okay, let's make a Godzilla film about this. But then you have um, sometimes the writers and or the directors, like Honda, for example, putting in some of their own personal views within that story, right? Like Honda was always a pacifist. He always wanted he always wanted the world to come together to solve its problems, for countries to put their differences aside, to come together and to solve the greater problems that are hurting this world. But Shin Godzilla is not that. Shin Godzilla is a political film that has Godzilla. And Ed Gajuszewski even came out and said, because he, like we stated earlier in this podcast, he occasionally works in Japan. And he asked some of his coworkers, what did you think of Shin Godzilla? Because I guess a lot of his coworkers there in Japan weren't big Godzilla fans. They don't tend to watch the movies and the stuff like he does. And so he asked him one day, well, what's your opinion of Shin Godzilla? Because they went and saw it because it was this big phenomenon. And Ed replied his findings to us that when the people talked to him about Shin Godzilla over there in Japan, everything that they told him that they liked about the film or loved about it, nothing in that film had anything to do with Godzilla or the Godzilla scenes. It was about, yeah, we're Japan. We want to be our own country. We don't want the U.S. to always be in here and meddle in our, in our affairs, and we want to be able to have our own standing army again. Where sure, they got a self-defense force, but we want to be able to have an army to kind of, if need to, go out and protect ourselves and that sort of thing. And so, and I told people too, again, when Shin Godzilla won the Japanese Academy Award, I said, it's not because it has Godzilla in it. I said it won the Japanese Academy Award in spite of the fact that there's Godzilla in it. And I want American fans especially to understand this, because I think there's too much love of Shin. And I'm not saying, look, if you love Shin, more power to you. That's great. But Shin Godzilla has a lot of issues, and I find it interesting that a lot of the same reasons people love Shin are the same reasons they hate the '98 film. I find that interesting and a little funny at the same time, because there's a lot of pandering and fan service going on in this film for the Godzilla fans, and that was intentional, because I think Higuchi knew. And Anno, I think, was more involved with the actual sort of crafting of the story and the political side of the story, more so than Higuchi. But there was a lot of fan service, and that's very similar to what Disney has done in recent years with the Star Wars franchise. That the Star Wars franchise has become really dull. There's nothing new. There's nothing really exciting about it. But they
not
have a
only
lot of
the Star Wars, but what it comes to Marvel as well.
Well, I'm talking more specifically Star Wars in this example,
right?
Because with Star Wars, and I'm sorry, Dr. Night Gaunt, I'll try to get to your question here in a moment. But with Star Wars, it's gotten to be a lot of fan service where they have a lot of references to the previous films. I haven't seen Solo, but I've heard from numerous people that have seen it that Solo, through music and through certain moments in the film, that it references like Empire Strikes Back, A New Hope, etc. Yeah, and unfortunately for a lot of people, Star Wars has become very stale at this point because of that. For me, Shin Godzilla was in many ways sort of fan service with the music that they played and some of the other things. Plus, Godzilla didn't really have much of a personality. There was really no motive for him in there. So for Dr. Night Gaunt, did the U.S. ever apologize for dropping 2 atom bombs on civilian populations? I want to say they did. I think they did when Obama was president.
Don't quote us on that, but
I'm going to look it up here. Why don't you go ahead and continue talking? But nevertheless, my opinion on the panel of Godzilla and Japanese nationalism was very good. But for your question, Dr. Knight Gaunt, I do believe the U.S. did. I think they've done it within the last 10 years. But go ahead, Jason.
But yeah, I was basically in the same panel as you were in, and basically I don't really have much to add into that, except for it was a pretty interesting panel. It also kind of dispelled some of the things that have been kind of rumored about for quite some time here and there. But it was a pretty informative panel, to say the least. Not only talking about what Kent was just talking about, Shin Godzilla, but a lot of kind of, I think they went over a certain amount of films that they have selected, even though how much of time that they had on their hands. So they kind of selected, I think, at least a few Godzilla, maybe some of the non-Godzilla films for this panel.
Answer. I don't mean to interrupt, but I do have an answer to your question. Okay. I
Okay.
thought the U.S. did apologize, but no. I think there was a rumor going around that Obama was going to apologize, but he offered sympathies but did not apologize for dropping the bomb. And I even see another article here from the LA Times from 2 years ago that Japan doesn't even want the U.S. to apologize for dropping the bomb either. So I thought they did, but no, that was a rumor. So Obama gave sympathies to the Japanese people, but no apology.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think that was about it. I think I might have left at a certain point of that panel. And I think, let's see here, I'm trying to look at the schedule here. I think I might have walked around for a bit and went in the dealer's room for a bit as well. And then at around 2 o'clock, I think I have the end part of the objectively the best Godzilla movie ever, period, which from what I've seen there, it was kind of like the NCAA basketball tourney, kind of like what we did with the Kaiju tourney thing a couple of years ago, where they kind of pit movies with one another and see who voted or who had the most votes and advances and the like. So.
Yeah, we saw the tail end of that. Before that, we spent most of our time in the Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2 25th anniversary panel. That was another fun panel. A lot of that quickly went to Q&A as well, but the Q&A actually for that panel was actually really good, and there was a lot of information as far as behind the scenes of that particular film, and also talking about, I think, one, if not a couple, of American actors and actresses that were participated in that film. So that was a very interesting panel, and that's one of my personal favorite Godzilla films from the Heisei era. So that was fun. And then at the tail end, because I also wanted to see the best Godzilla movie ever, period, panel as well. And I just thought to myself, I'll sit through most of the Mechagodzilla one, and then towards the end, I'll kind of venture over to that other panel next door and see kind of what the final results were. And the final four consisted of Godzilla vs. Biollante, Destroy All Monsters, Shin Godzilla, and very surprising, but for me it was a pleasant surprise, Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster. And for longtime listeners of this podcast, you know that Godzilla vs. Sea Monster was the first Godzilla film we saw and got us hooked on not just Godzilla films, but the Kaiju genre as well. So for me personally, just even seeing the Sea Monster make it that far was a real treat.
Mm-hmm.
I knew it wasn't going to make it to the final two. I'm like, there's no way. But then it came down to the final two, which was Destroy All Monsters and Godzilla vs. Biollante. And I thought, okay, maybe the books are cooked here because I'm like, it's the 50th anniversary of Destroy All Monsters. Destroy All Monsters is probably going to come up on top here. No, that actually wasn't the case. Godzilla vs. Biollante came out on top.
Well, before that, they kind of joked and they had Bambi meets Godzilla.
Yeah, they joked
in there.
Yeah, they were like, and the best Godzilla movie ever, period, is click Bambi meets Godzilla. But then they were like, no, well, we're fibbing. And so then they went on to the actual slide saying, okay, actual winner is Godzilla versus Biollante, which I've kind of said here a few times on the podcast. I'm like, Godzilla vs. Biollante really is one of the better films of the franchise. And it's definitely gained a lot of traction here with US fans anyways. So, and I know the Japanese here back in, I think it was 2012, they voted on what they thought was the best Godzilla movie ever, and Godzilla vs. Biollante came out on top there, which I thought was surprising. I didn't think it actually was going to make it that far. I thought maybe they would. I thought the obvious answer was, oh, it's Gojira, but no, it wasn't. It was Biollante. So, yeah. So let's kind of wrap up this podcast episode here. Let's rank the G-Fest.
Oh boy. Well, have you? I know you mentioned you were wanting to go back to the the program books from previous G-Fest and just kind of compare. Have you ever gotten around to doing that?
I didn't, but I spent quite a bit of time with my memory, so that's what I did.
But as for me, when it comes to ranking G-Fest 25, my overall feeling of it was, I mean, obviously, with both Ken and I know we've mentioned about this, kind of beating a dead horse with it. By far, it's light years ahead of G-Fest 21, which, if for those of you that are new to the Kaiju Network podcast here, we've ranked out of, was it the 7 years or out of the 7 times we've been to G-Fest?
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I didn't see Dr. Nightgaunt post another thing here. My apologies because I had my notes in front of there. Dr. Nightgaunt says, my point being that Godzilla started its cinematic life as an essentially anti-US film. Actually, it wasn't anti-US. Shiro Honda has been on record numerous times, and even Peter Brothers recently had a book published in the last year and a half, I think it was, where it talked about the making of just the first Godzilla movie. In fact, let me find it here.
But from what I was getting at, for those that are new to Kaiju Network, we've ranked G-Fest 21 last out of the times that we've been going there since G-Fest 19.
And so here's the book. Atomic Dreams and the Nuclear Nightmare, The Making of Godzilla, 1954. This states it, and I think many other books like I think even Steve Rifle's book, when the one he wrote, Japan's Favorite Monster, a number of years back, and I think even David Cowlett has mentioned it too. It wasn't anti-US, it was anti-war. Just because of obviously the loss of life and the fact that war escalates so much to the point that, everybody's affected by it, not just the people who fight it, but also obviously civilians as well, those who are on the sidelines. As with the dropping of the atomic bomb, civilians, of course, were deeply affected by that. So no, it wasn't anti-US, it was anti-war is what it was.
Okay. So just kind of getting back to the ranking part here. From what I'm thinking of with G-Fest 25, I would say it was a pretty good convention. I wouldn't say as great compared to G-Fest 22 and 23. Um, let's see here. And I might, as far as the rankings go, um, I probably would put, let's see here. Uh, I would say, is it G-Fest 23 at number one? Let's see, and G-Fest 22 at number two. I would put G-Fest 19 at number three, simply because it was our first time being there, and it's still kind of sentimental to us in a way. And what I would put as number four, I probably would put G25 as number four. And then after that, it would be G-Fest 20, and then 24, and then 21.
Okay. For me, overall, my overall impressions of G-Fest 25, definitely a very good convention this year. Better than 24 last year. 24, I thought, sadly, was a little bit of a disappointment. But really only one bad panel this year, which was the Pacific Rim Uprising, as I had mentioned earlier. This was tough as far as me trying to rank the G Fest. I mean, it was kind of easy for me as far as what my bottom two were. But after I got past those two, as far as being kind of my worst G Fests, it became very, very difficult as far as where to place the rest, because these other five were very, very good, and it was just tough to place them. Some of these could be interchangeable depending upon my mood, I guess. So number 7, obviously G-Fest 21 is my least favorite. Next is G-Fest 24. I ended up putting G-Fest 25 actually at number 5, which was tough because I did enjoy. And like I said, kind of from slot 5 all the way up to best at number 1, it was difficult for me to figure out where to place them because these 5 really were all very good in their various ways.
A lot of them have been really good, except for 21, of course.
Yeah. For number 4, I have G-Fest 22. Number 3, I have G-Fest 23. Number 2 is I have G-Fest 20. And number 1, obviously, is G-Fest 19. These two, 19 and 20, in the number 1 and number 2 slots, really are the ones that could be interchangeable at any given moment. The reason why those are obviously at the top is because those were our first two. Neither one of us had been to, not just, we had never been to not only a Godzilla convention before, but we had never been to any conventions, period, prior to going to G-Fest 19. So it really was a whole new experience for us. And it just, when you go to some of these things for the first time, you're just awestruck because you're like, oh my gosh, like all these panels are going on, all these different things. Like, this is great. This is awesome. And there are many other people around here that love the same things that I do. And it's so overwhelming in a very positive manner. And I will never forget either that when we visited Artist Alley there, which used to be across in that little area where the dealer's room is, which is now the autograph section. I will never forget Jay Hoffman. I bought a couple pictures from him, and he was talking to us. Is this your first G-Fest? Asking us about it, and we're like, yeah. He's like, man, that's great. There's nothing like the first time you come here. That's great. Congratulations. I'm happy you're able to come. Enjoy the rest of the convention. And I will never forget that. I mean, it just the welcoming and the warmth that he gave us. It meant a lot to me, and it was just great because first impressions are everything with a lot of things, and that G-Fest 19 was no exception. And I really enjoyed it. And like I said, just something about the first time, obviously, just just the feelings of excitement and being overwhelmed in a good way are why I put G-Fest 19 up there. G-Fest 20 was very similar too. I mean, just a lot of great panels, and just the fact too that it still was relatively new to us at the time too, and that's the reason why I have it up there as well.
Hmm.
But with that, we're going to close out episode 117 of the Daikaiju Network podcast. Again, as a reminder, our usual podcast episode won't be on the 4th of August. I will be out of town. We will try to do it the 11th. If that doesn't work, then we will try to do it on the 18th. But we will let everyone know when we will do an episode, whether it will be the 11th or the 18th. But regardless, our next episode will cover Godzilla City on the Edge of Battle, the second entry in the Godzilla anime universe. So that's something we're going to be talking about. Part of me, now that I think about it, may want to wait until the 11th, simply because I have the score to that film, and I would like to try to get that listened to as well. And if I'm coming back Thursday and all I have is Friday, that's a lot for me to try to take in, the score and the movie. And I usually like to watch the movies twice before we discuss them, just in case I forget something or whatever. But that's what
I've
we'll be
already seen
covering.
it once so far, so just might need to see it one more time or a couple more times, like I did with the previous anime.
Yeah, I started it here. I got like 10, 12 minutes into it here the other day, and then I had to take care of a few things, and I haven't gone back to watch it yet. So, you August 11th is kind of the tentative date. I'm actually starting to think maybe we should do it on the 18th, just so I can have definitely that extra time to watch it and also get that score in as well. But then again, though, too, I could probably do that this week too before I leave. So, nevertheless, we'll keep you posted. Hopefully, you enjoyed this podcast. If you weren't able to attend G-Fest 25, we hope we kind of gave you a little bit of an idea of what the convention was like this year. Again, it was very limited because we only can be in one place at one time. So we obviously just discussed the panels we went to.
And then the strength of the Wi-Fi there, with a lot of the people connected to it. So when we took some videos and stuff, I think a lot of it we didn't do live. We just kind of did it, just kind of recorded it on our phones, cameras, and all that stuff, and then just kind of uploaded it later, like I usually did with the Instagram TV thing.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, so we hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe to us on YouTube if you enjoy it. We will continue to do our podcasts via live stream, and then we will obviously take the audio portion, edit it out, put it on iTunes. So subscribe to us on there, please. Tell all your friends about us. If you have friends that love giant monsters, kaiju, and all that, please spread the word. We got a Facebook page, we got Instagram, we got Twitter. There are numerous social media platforms.
And Google Play as well. So we're not just only on iTunes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So please spread the word. Again, as Dr. Nightgaunt had here, he engaged in us in chat during the part of the podcast here. We encourage people to do that. So please do that. We love discussing things with you guys, as long as it's kaiju related and kind of on topic. We love to do that. So please subscribe. Tell all your friends about us. Spread the word. Spread our links from the YouTube page, our Facebook page, etc. And thank you so much for listening to us. So take care.
Catch you guys later.